Recently, two eye-catching international summits were held in Asia. One is the first China-Central Asia summit held in China, and the other is the United States-dominated Group of Seven summit held in Japan. The two summits had huge contrast in many aspects, like the summit's content, people's responses to each summit, and their influence on the world. The China-Central Asia Summit this year was chaired by Chinese President, with the attendance of leaders from Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. It's the first summit held offline by the heads of state of the six countries since establishing diplomatic ties 31 years ago. The two-day summit concluded with fruitful results. According to CGTN, China and the five Central Asia countries signed 7 bilateral and multilateral documents. According to these documents, the six countries vow to join hands to build a community with a shared future and establish meeting and dialogue mechanisms and a wide range of multilateral cooperation platforms in industry and investment, agriculture, transportation, emergency management, education, and political party affairs. Meanwhile, commitments to cooperation were carried out in action. Cooperative projects between China and Central Asian countries rolled out in succession. For example, on the summit sidelines, business representatives from China and Uzbekistan concluded cooperation agreements in trade, energy, agriculture, digital technology, etc. China Railway Construction Corp. And State Power Investment Corp. Signed an investment agreement with Kyrgyzstan to build the Central Asian country's first large-scale, centralized photovoltaic project. Chinese food giant COFCO signed a deal with Kazakhstan's Agriculture Ministry to work on improving agricultural trade between the two countries. Let's see what the G7 summit this year has achieved. Unlike the China-Central Asia summit that does not target any third party, the G7 summit had put most of its efforts into discussing how to beef up sanctions against Russia, make up countermeasures against China, and intensify all kinds of aid to Ukraine. According to the Financial Times, the G7 has issued its strongest condemnation of China. VOA reported that the G7 communique amps up pressure on China and Russia. Compared with the China-Central Asia summit's contribution to regional peace and joint development, G7 was dedicated to playing geopolitical games with risks of escalating tensions and splitting the world. Therefore, the two summits received different responses from the world. During the G7 summit this year, protesters took to the streets of Hiroshima to raise their voices in opposition to the G7 summit being held in the city. Some of them chanted anti-war slogans, and some demanded the abolishment of nuclear weapons.
Now we're seeing a massive protest in the center of Hiroshima city. Dozens of people are walking down the street shouting they're against holding G7 summit here.
In contrast, the first China-Central Asia summit had been welcomed especially by people from the six nations.
我喜欢中国和加西会谈未来有很多合作。
我和你期待这世界峰会。
祝中国中亚峰会成功。
希望中国中亚峰会圆满成功。
One summit is for common development, prosperity, and peace. The other one is to promote confrontations and wars to safeguard the U.S.'s interests. Which one do you support?